3 games into the NBA Finals, and it's all Boston. They're up 3-0. We'll take a look at last night's game, including probably a horrifying fourth quarter for Celtics fans. Luka's turn, potentially, and some Tatum stuff coming off of Game 2 and a terrific Game 3. We got Howard Beck to break down the finals even more, compare the 24 Celtics to a 22 team that he covered in the finals. We've got some stuff on the Lakers coaching search, and, of course, Jerry West and life advice. Okay, Boston takes a 3-0 lead in the NBA Finals. How did we get here? Let's start with a couple different things. I want to talk Tatum, I want to talk Luka, and why the Celtics remind me of Glenn Ross. So we figured it wasn't a great matchup basketball-wise for Dallas. I think a lot of us felt that way. But I still felt with Luka and Kyrie going off, the offensive capabilities of what those two guys can do, and they went off last night in the box score. Kyrie had a terrific game. A lot was tasked on him with Luka fouling out, which, of course, we'll get to. So Kyrie responds. You could see from the beginning of the game, much more assertive, looking to attack, from the first possession. So that wasn't an issue at all. But I thought with the combination of those two guys and what they're capable of and the improved defense that we've been looking at as a major factor at the end of the regular season and carrying on through the playoffs, and the Boston stuff, the stuff that if you've watched the Celtics all season long, well, if you have Celtics fans that are friends of yours, where they're like, they're really, look, the stuff that Bill and I have talked about all year long about just those moments where you're like, what is up with these guys? Well, we got a full fourth quarter of it after a small sampling of it at the end of Game 2. But when I look at Dallas's problems, and there's a long list here, the others is one of the headlines. The others meaning if you look at the third, fourth, and fifth leading scorers for the Mavericks through the 3 games in the finals, they've combined for 29.7 points per game. Boston's others, depending on who that is, because there's like 4 or 5 guys you can pick from that group where Dallas can't. Boston's group is outscoring those 3 leading scorers by 20 points, almost 20 points a game. They're averaging 48. PJ Washington was Grayson Allen against the Thunder, hitting 47% of his threes, went for 25% against Minnesota. So you're like, okay, maybe he just had the bad shooting night because there were still looks. Boston, it's at 29%. And when I watch PJ, when I watch Derek Jones, Gafford's not somebody you're really going to be trusting to give you something offensively, even though they tried that late in Game 2 because Tatum's his primary defender. If they're not bringing Tatum up into the switch, it just looks like these guys are just uncomfortable and not even thinking about the rim. There's just a group of possessions where even if somebody else gets a catch, it's just like, I don't want anything to do with this. And then you factor in that Cleve is clearly hurt, not even thinking about shooting, which you've already touched on in Game 2. Dallas in the finals is now 28% overall from 3, 37% on the regular season. They were searching last night big time. They played 11 guys in the first half. Gafford, who's been such a big part of this defensive resurgent in this kind of Dallas 2.0 version, he played 16 minutes last night. He played 14 minutes in the first game. So you could say, well, first game was kind of a blowout, but he's just played 50 total minutes through 3 games. And it's clear that Kidd is just not trusting him the way he just wasn't either exploited or was just having better games, because I think his life was just a lot easier in a non-Boston matchup. If you look at Dallas's defense, before the finals, it was actually only 7th overall in the playoffs at 111 points per 100 possessions. Now it's 8th through 3 games in the finals. The number's basically the same, but that's a massive departure from where they were at their last 15 games of the regular season, where they were number 1 in defense. You could say it's too small of a sample, but that's the thing that kept making you feel like you have to throw out the season-long stats from Dallas, which I still think is the right thing to do. But that number was 5 points better at 106. Now, you could even argue that their playoff number is lower because they faced the Clippers, although a diminished version, a terrific OKC offense, which still just didn't have enough around SGA, and then Minnesota that was in a majority of those games in the Western Conference Finals. So the resume of teams that they're facing are tougher than anybody else. So maybe that number is going to go down. But you factor in that they're also now collectively shooting way less from 3. These are just all a lot of problems. They're all coming to a head in the NBA Finals. Okay, the Boston angle. If you remember Alec Baldwin's terrific monologue They're sitting out there waiting to give you their money. That's what the Celtics do. And boy, did they try to do it in the fourth quarter. It was 85-70 after 3. At that point, Boston, at the start of the fourth quarter, after Derek White 3 and a timeout, it's 91-70. Boston has a 41-19 advantage in the second half. And then Boston invited Dallas back into this game because of the way they just somehow cannot help themselves from avoiding these offensive stretches where you're like, what are you guys doing? Here's a collection of my favorites. A Peyton Pritchard ISO jumper, granted late shot clock. A Jaylen Brown no-dribble three-point attempt with 8 seconds left on the shot clock, switched on to Lively. Another Peyton Pritchard ISO jumper where he tried to hit a step back against PJ Washington. Again, another late shot clock. Tatum had an ISO against Kyrie, and Kyrie actually held up terrific defensively, but it's that left elbow swing around, up and down. I don't even know if it was a fadeaway jumper or whatever it was. It was a flailing jumper that really had no chance. Jaylen Brown later on has a step back 3 against Luka with 9 seconds left on the shot clock. For whatever reason, he took that one. Horford travels, juggling the ball after Luka had fallen down, that play that we'll get to, so it was 5-on-4, and then Horford somehow travels. You've got a Jaylen Brown turnover in there. I mean, look, I could list the entire game log. I'm not going to do that for you. There was that Luka Jaylen Brown collision where, not on the 6th foul for Luka, it was a different one. The ball got loose, Tatum grabbed it, and then Drew Holiday decides to take a 3 that's not even close to like what you'd expect from him in his game with 15 seconds left on the shot clock. All right. It was possession after possession where they're either so determined to run down the clock that they didn't care about the look. But that's what I can't stand about all basketball at all levels, is really the way I should say it, where it's like, don't become so obsessed with running clock that you're just inviting yourself into these awful matchups or shot attempts. I don't think Pritchard decides to go, hey, boys, it's Pritchard time. So those shots, again, as I point out, late in the shot clock, but it just keeps happening over and over and over again. At one point, Dallas had gone on a 22-2 run. So from the 91-70 score, through all the stuff that I'm talking about here, it's 93-22. We're talking about a 22-2 Dallas run. Boston, from when it was 91-70 in 53 seconds, scored 2 points over the next 8 minutes. And when they got it to 93, they didn't score any points for 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Again, they're waiting to give you their money. I knew if I were a Dallas fan after game 2, I'd be like, they were terrible from 3. They were up 9, even though Boston was 6-30 from 3. And then they had that brutal stretch towards the end. This was almost the entire fourth quarter. There was also another step back 3 from Tatum later where he was trying to put the game away, where you're like, what is that? Now, Drew Holiday may have had the play of the game. Jaylen Brown hit a turnaround shot later. That was kind of game. But Drew Holiday at 92, when he made it 98-92, it was almost like he just thought, all right, enough of this shit. Drives baseline, throws a ridiculous pass. Derek White hits a 3. So Luka had fouled out at 4:12. On the Horford travel play that I mentioned, there was also another Horford turnover in there where he got a rebound and decided to bring the ball up by himself for whatever reason and turned it over. So it's just unbelievable how great this offensive team is, how great they are defensively, how great all the stats are over and over and over again. And you're like, wait, if this team is this good, why do they do stuff like that for like 8 straight minutes when it's the difference between likely closing out your opponent with one more game to win and 4 more chances versus Dallas going, all right, we survived it, historic comeback, it's 2-1, and Porzingis may or may not be coming back, building some confidence, all of that. Like that entire quarter is about 2 very divergent paths, and Boston just decided to put on one of the worst displays of offense that we've seen in the playoffs. So Luka is a big topic as well, because all of these things end up massive referendums on the biggest stars. So when he drives on Tatum at 93-87. He flops, goes into the baseline seats. It's 5-on-4. Luckily, they get the Horford travel, but that's a huge possession, obviously, in that moment. But Luka's so mad about not getting the call that he just hangs back. He fouls out at 4:12 when it's 93-90. I think it's a terrible decision with 5 fouls to put yourself at risk of trying to get a charge on kind of a scramble play where Tatum's bringing it up in transition. There's just not, even if you're going to get that call, you can't risk it being your 6th, where you're like, wait, I'll add to this. When I'm sitting at home, much like you're sitting at home watching that game, you're thinking, are they really going to foul out Luka? I think it's worth taking note of the times where you expect the conspiracy to lead towards one decision and then keeping track of the times of like, you know what? They fouled them out. They reviewed it. They went back and said, first of all, they called it. Second of all, they didn't overturn it to go, hey, let's just keep Luka in the game, see if you can extend the series. Keep track of the times the conspiracies do not win. You'd be surprised. He also yelled at the bench, swore at the bench, because Luka just cannot help himself, and then he ends up fouling out. So he's getting destroyed today. Windhorst lit him up on Van Pelt's show last night. It was pointed. It was aggressive. I would say it felt like a little bit too much when it became, hey, the winners are over there and he's going to have to figure this stuff out, because I think both things are true. We've talked about how much Luka is basically insufferable at times. I actually think he can play more against LA and OKC than he has in the finals. I think he toned it down a bit in Minnesota too, because they were in control of that series. So this isn't even the worst version of what I've seen from him in series prior. His defense in game 2 was atrocious. He had some defensive approaches in this game that were terrible. Drew Holiday just dribbles into a 3, and Luka's got him. There's no screen, and Luka just lets him take the 3. The end of the third quarter, the Jaylen Brown dunk to make it 85-70. It's Kyrie on Hauser. It's Kyrie on Jaylen, and Hauser has Luka on him. Hauser comes up to set the screen. Jaylen actually went early, and Luka doesn't even get into the screening action. He just hangs back just beyond the free throw line, and he doesn't even move. And Dallas had a smaller lineup out there for it. And then Jaylen finishes with the emphatic dunk on top of just the times he's getting torched in game 2 and all those different switches. So here's what I think is very fair about Luka. He complains way too much. It looked even worse last night as he's fouling out, because he can't do that. He's not good on defense, but against Minnesota, they did not have the personnel to take advantage of it the way Boston does, because Minnesota would always have people that you could cheat off of. Really the same thing with OKC. Like, all right, you can go ahead, and OKC couldn't hit any shots on top of everything else outside of SGA. But when it becomes, is he incapable of winning because of what happened last night in game 3, that's where I think it goes a little too far, because I would expect almost everyone would agree with this. The only reason the Mavericks are even in the NBA Finals is because of Luka. But a week removed from he's the best player in the world, knowing that he would be anointed the best player in the world, you would feel like an idiot still saying Jokic is the best player in the world if Luka were to pull this off. 2, now is he wired the wrong way? That's where I think it's too much, despite all of the criticism being fair and coming to, like, this is part of the finals too, where it's like more people are watching and really paying attention, which is very different from those of us, you listening, me talking on the pod about like how much we watch these guys all the time. Like, yeah, we knew this, we saw this, but Boston, because of the way they stretch you out, exploits it much more. Because the finals just ends up, and now we have to like reclassify everybody, although we may have the first finals non-belt transfer in a long time, because Luka's not going to be allowed to have it, and not saying he deserves it. The funny thing will be like what happens with Tatum. Because if Tatum had played better in the first couple games and they're up 3-0, and say he's on track to win a finals MVP, which he's not, I would imagine Jaylen is going to win it. If this is a series that's, say Dallas gets game 4, Boston goes home, wins game 5, like we don't have we'd have to have a shift from what we've had based on production so far for Brown to not win finals MVP. And you could argue his turnaround shot late last night is really the one that sealed it, more so than the Derek White 3 off of the Drew Holiday pass. But it might be kind of refreshing that we could have a finals outcome where you're not going, well, now what do we do with Tatum? Like, I don't know. I would keep him in the same place. I think he's awesome. I thought he was worse than other people did in game 2. Maybe it was because I was there. Maybe you saw something different on TV. I thought he was a guy that was in between decisions as an offensive player who's the primary option, and that's a scary place to be because he just had lost his confidence. I do not understand the step-back threes. I'll never understand this. It doesn't go in enough. You're settling, and you're letting the defense off the hook. But now we have Luka where maybe it just gets really nasty if they were to get swept, which I don't think I'm going to do. I just don't, because I'd be like, okay, these are the limitations that I knew about him. And all, by the way, the rest of the guys aren't doing anything, and Kyrie hadn't really done much in games 1 and 2. So it'll be a departure from the normal routine post-finals of like, okay, we have a result. How good is this team? How disappointing is the other team? What do they need to do to fix it? And let's talk about the stars. Where can we slide them in the top 10 rankings? And I'd argue they're probably going to stay in the same place for me before the finals even started. Excited to talk to Howard Beck, who I can introduce as part of the Ringer after decades in this. I think the first time we ever talked to each other, I was filling in for Oberman. And you came down to the studio. We did just kind of like a little studio thing. And then I did some Twins highlights. So it's been a while, man. Good to see you.
Your memory's better than mine, Russillo. I remember doing that. I still think I might even have like a photo on my phone, like a shot of like, hey, let's take the quick photo before we go on air or whatever. I had no TV experience back then, or very little, whatever. I think I remember being really nervous. I did not remember Twins highlights. So your memory's better than mine. But I do remember that, yes, the first time we met was in a studio doing Olbermann's show, and then we randomly ran into each other at the Salt Lake All-Star game when I was hanging out with my daughter there last year, right after I got laid off by SI.
That's right. And we talked a bit about that. I the only reason I remember the Twins highlights, and by the way, I wasn't exactly like Mr. Anchor, but the Olbermann crew was nice enough to have me in when Olbermann was off. And then we were running through, I think, the 4 segments. So it was like an opening monologue. It might have only been 3. There might have been like a parting thing, but it was like an opening monologue that you had to write out. And then you had and I promise we'll get to the NBA finals here very, very shortly. But I remember like the other part, it was like, oh, these are the Keith lights. I was like, what the fuck is that? And they go, well, Keith's one of the best reading highlights. So we want to keep that in the daily show.
Was I on for a specific purpose that day? It was obviously NBA, but like, was it a Knicks thing? Was it I don't even remember what we were doing. It was definitely here in New York.
Yeah, I don't remember that. I don't remember this. Yeah. There had to have been something specific, but I just thought, well, I'm not an anchor though, so I've never really done highlights on TV. And they're like, well, that's the show, man. It's the Overman show. So
good luck.
So I'm sitting there going like, man, a drive deep to left center. May have missed a spot. Okay, here we are. The Celtics are up 3-0 on the Mavs. Has anything about this series surprised you?
I guess top line, the only thing I may be surprised at is that it's 3-0, right? Like, I expected the Celtics to win. I expected the Celtics to win potentially handily if Porzingis were healthy to start the series and looking like himself, which he was until he wasn't. And then, of course, when Porzingis was lost, it's like, ooh, there's an opening here. Oh, the Mavericks are at home. The Celtics are missing Porzingis. Kyrie's off to a really great start, his best game of the series. And so, you and I both know how this goes. Like, sometimes the reality just follows almost a plot line that we expect. Oh, a team goes up 2-0. Oh, they're probably going to win, but the Mavericks will get one at home. They'll extend the series. They're too good to just get swept. And then I think they just kind of came unglued. I mean, Luka in particular, I thought in a lot of ways came unglued. But nothing has surprised me in the sense that once you took the 2 stars on each side aside, you knew that the Celtics were better 3 through whatever than the Mavericks were. And they had the experience of having been there in 2022 and having been to multiple conference finals. This is the more seasoned team. And so I think the Celtics had all the advantages going in and home court on top of it all. And it's, again, more or less played out, I think, the way we would have expected. You could mess with the details, right? Well, you wouldn't have expected necessarily that Tatum was going to shoot this poorly or that Jaylen Brown would be like the leading candidate for MVP right now. Like, maybe some of those details we wouldn't have projected, but I think the broad strokes of this series are kind of what we expected.
Yeah, I'm there as well. So let's just get into the Luka part of it, because he was on the doorstep of being anointed, because that's just the way it would have worked if the Mavs were able to figure out a way to pull this off. And I'm wondering how far it can swing the other way, because like, as much as I want to, we'll get to Tatum here. Or like, I think Tatum is in a very defined status area in the NBA where the Luka swing, the pendulum of like what he would have been the best player in the world to now last night, more people watching in a way they've never watched before, where the defense was terrible in game 2. He's never going to be a good defensive player, but he needs to fight a little bit more. He had multiple lapses, and then he puts him in a self position to foul out. I think both things are true, as I said in the open. The only reason the Mavs are in the finals is because of that guy. Yeah. But I'm open to the criticism, but I wonder how far back it can swing, or maybe it'll just be that week after until everybody forgets about it. And then we look at him in an entirely different phase in October of 24-25.
Yeah, I mean, starting last night, we were getting kind of like, remember back when we used to get like the James Harden defensive highlight reels where people would just like string together all of Harden's most asleep, just lackluster, completely, just checked out defensive possessions and string them all together. I was seeing a lot of that on the timeline last night and this morning with Luka. And so suddenly, the backlash because they've lost and he fouls out, and he had some really just god awful possessions last night. And so there's some of that going on. Here's the thing. Luka, in the course of his career, has been generally a minus defender. One of the reasons that the Mavericks made the strides they did this season, they got PJ Washington, they got Daniel Gafford, they made Derrick Jones Jr. a starter. They did all these other things to become one of the better defensive teams and to make this trek to the finals. But along the way, Luka and Kyrie started playing at a level defensively above what they were known for. Luka was trying. Luka and as we all said, like, if we're going to praise Luka for this, it's okay to criticize him when it slips. Luka, two things. He started defending with some conscience for a while to get them here. He started to rein himself in with regard to the bitching after every single call or non-call to the refs. Both of those things have regressed mightily in this series. And if we're going to praise him when he got himself together on those things, then we certainly need to point out when it slipped. And it has. But that's not the whole thing, right? Let's go back to the top line. Before people start burying Luka on this, and the criticism is legit, the fact is the Celtics came in with all the advantages. Like, the reason that the Celtics could be up 3-0 with Jason Tatum, who, again, he's their best player. I know we're going to talk about Jaylen Brown versus Jason Tatum, but people are going to get caught up in all this. I don't really care. But Tatum can have a bad couple of shooting games, and they can still be up 2-0 leaving Boston because they've got Derek White and Drew Holiday and Jaylen Brown, and for a while Porzingis and Horford. They're just better. So Luka doesn't have as much support. Would Luka do just as well with that support? That's a different question.
I thought when Kidd said it, because I did local TV before game 2, and I was like, Kidd was so emphatic about the Jaylen Brown thing, and not that he was hammering the table. It's just that we're not used to coaches ever doing something like that. Like, is he already going with the mind tricks? And then I'd read something else following up. It's like, hey, they both went to Cal and they have this relationship. And I was like, okay, it's a fair point, but it still was not what we're used to seeing. And one of the things I think was, when I was asked, like, hey, what do you think? I was like, one, I do think he did it on purpose, but this team has been through this already so many times. The realization that I've had now, and I try to share this, where it's people are kind of sick of Boston, them again. And you're like, well, I always felt like they were ahead of schedule in those earlier years. So now you feel like there's this longer hangover for what was a team this year on paper that was so dominant. It's like, so what are you actually mad at? You can't even be mad at this version. You're mad at 2018. You're mad at the 2020 Heat one. I mean, certainly 22, 23 going into this year, I understood the criticisms for it. But I know you cover the 22 finals. So when you look at this team in comparison to that one, and I would just add this part of it, like that mind trick may have worked in 20 with these two guys. It wasn't going to work in 24.
Yeah, and I'll throw another layer on this, and I swear, like, people don't, they don't aggregate. This admonition never actually works. But I'll just say, Russillo, that I'm bringing this up not for the purpose of saying that this is the case right now or that I'm trying to start anything. I'm just saying, in the past, over the last 4 or 5 years, periodically, not just when the Celtics were struggling, but even when they were doing well, there was just periodically buzz around rivals across the league about how Jaylen Brown would sometimes chafe at this kind of like co-starring or secondary star role, and that Jaylen Brown had really high aspirations, expectations for himself and his career. And it was kind of this is, again, other team executives saying, hey, don't be surprised if at some point, based on a lot of things, including, by the way, contract situations, and this is even before the new CBA, and we know what Jaylen Brown signed last year, that don't be surprised if eventually Jaylen Brown wants his own team somewhere. Don't be surprised if they break them up because Jaylen wants something. And there's parallels to like Kyrie leaving LeBron back in 2017, right? Where it's one thing to go to the finals 3 straight years and win a championship, but Kyrie at that stage of his career felt like he needed something else for himself. And so it's not even they don't like each other or they're rivals. Like, this is not a Shaq and Kobe situation. It was just more of the idea that sometimes guys need to spread their wings. That was what I heard back then. I have not heard that in a while. So I don't know if people still feel that. But I bring that up just to say that when we talk about, and I think you're right, Russillo, in the past, Jason Kidd throwing that little grenade out there might have had more impact. I think those guys are really solid now. They've been through everything, including the heartbreak of losing a finals after leading in that series 2 years ago. And so they're more mature. They're not as vulnerable. They're not as likely to fall for the mind tricks or the banana in the tailpipe. And they're steadier in the clutch. Like, we can talk about how they nearly blew the lead last night, but we could also say, no, they held on and they secured it. And, it happens, right? 20-point leads are nothing in this league anymore. And what I've been impressed by is that they withstand it. They might get out of themselves a little bit at times and start to rush some things or start settling for quick shots, but then it's back to ball movement, driving and kicking and finding good shots.
Yeah, the clutch numbers are so stupid because if you look at their net rating now in clutch moments or the playoffs, it's an off the charts number. It doesn't even make any. I think it's something like plus 47 or something stupid. And you go, okay, well, that's a really good team. Where the whole point of Dallas and Luka and Kyrie, and I agreed with Bill when he said this, I think it was a couple Sundays ago when we were watching him take out Minnesota. It's like, this is a lot like the Yankees with Rivera, where if you weren't ahead in the 8th inning, it just was over. Like, and there's a mental part of that where you're walking around the dugout going, if we wait until the 9th, like, the game's over. Yeah. And that's kind of how Luka was starting to feel, and Kyrie in moments as well, and closing out some of these other games. And then you look at their clutch number, and then you look at Boston's clutch number, and you're like, oh my God, like, why is everybody's on Boston's case? And then we see the fourth quarter last night. I ran through all the shots that I couldn't stand, the possessions that I thought were terrible, the fascination with running clock into bad matchups and bad shot attempts. Dallas had to have gotten one of those two. And the thing that scared Boston fans all season long has happened in 2 of the 3 games, and they're still up 3-0. And I think when Dallas goes back and thinks about this series, which, again, unless they're going to do something no one's ever done before, coming back from down 3-0, it's in those moments where you're like, how was there just not a little bit more? And it was not enough time in game 2, and then certainly Luka fouling out. But I'm not assuming that Dallas would pull it off. But these are the games that have always scared Boston fans. And they've happened, in 2 of the 3, and they're still up 3-0.
Yeah, it applies to both sides. If you're down to the last 2 minutes and the game is within 5 and you're playing the Mavericks, you almost expect the Mavericks are going to win because Luka and Kyrie are just such an incredible 1-2 punch as closers. And I absolutely agree that, the Mariano Rivera analogy is so fitting. And then the flip side of it is, for the Celtics down to the last 2 minutes within a couple of points, you almost expect them to lose based on their past. But I almost feel like we're now overplaying that. Like, I get that there's a long history of it, and I get that for Celtics fans in particular, they have some PTSD over blown leads and blown series. This is a different version of this team. They're older, more mature, they're deeper, and good Lord, they're about to, if they finish this sweep, Russillo, they will have the third best winning percentage in the modern era. I think since the playoffs went to 16 teams, they will have the third best winning percentage in winning a championship that has happened. So they will go down statistically or by win-loss in a postseason as one of the best champions or most dominant runs of all time. Now, I know we'll go straight back to, and our buddy, our colleague Zach Cram did a great piece a week or so ago about, hey, is this path to the finals really as weak as it seems? And yeah, when you factored in injuries and everything else, this was one of the easier paths to the finals. None of that matters. Like, no, we don't talk, like, we're not going back and looking at, like, what the path to the finals looked like for, like, the Pistons back in 89 or whatever. Like, we don't do this. We just have too many tools available to us now. and so we nitpick everything. They're legit champions regardless, and it's a legitimately dominant run regardless. And maybe the dominance of this run, with only 2 losses in the last however many months, maybe that should weigh more heavily than memories of blown leads past.
You're right. It should. And if they pull this off, which we expect they will, much like when the Lakers won in the bubble and people were like, oh, bubble title, but like somebody still has to win one of these things. And it's so hard to even do it. And I think the other part of the Celtics thing, which is praise, is just because Brad Stevens did a better job building his 1 through 7 than everybody else did, that's his fault.
Yeah.
I mean, he's to think of these being the 7 options. The number of arguments I get into friends with about Derek White, where they're like, this guy sucks, dude. And I'd be like, he doesn't. He's awesome. Like, he's going through a weird stretch. Promise you, for this guy to be a 4th or 5th option on a basketball team, like, it's not supposed to happen. You're not supposed to be able to have somebody this good in that spot. And that's what White is going to be for this team. And he's, really, his confidence is blown up and everything else. And you factor in the Drew thing, and to do this even without Porzingis, if he doesn't end up coming back. Although I know there was a report today saying that he could possibly play, but I don't believe any of this stuff anymore, just because I think they're all messing with each other the entire time. So you will not be, I shouldn't ask the question this way. Do you think there will be a lot of that? Like, will you be actively pushing back if the Celtics win and people try to put it down as one of the worst titles in recent history?
I don't know if we're going to see that. I mean, listen, far be it from...
You sure?
Yeah, I know. I was going to say...
I think we're going to see it if you're looking for it, but...
Far be it for either of us to try to predict what the hot takery machines out there will produce, and the fake debates and the manufactured, polarized discussions. I'm sure somebody will, because it's the world we live in. I won't spend a lot of oxygen on it. If somebody brings it up, if I'm on radio someday and somebody asks, like, I'll just say, like, listen, dominance is dominance. If you only lose 2 times in the entire postseason, you were pretty freaking good. And by the way, for whatever the nitpicking will be, and there, among the other things that people will nitpick on, they'll say, well, sure, they won the championship, but Jason Tatum, presumably not going to win MVP. Was this somehow a negative for Jason Tatum because of how poorly he played in the finals? And is he really a top 5 player? Like, we're going to get some of that too, but again, ridiculous. I want to give credit to our colleague Michael Pina on this one, who had a great feature on Tatum yesterday on The Ringer. But we were walking back from game 2 a few nights back, and Pina we were just talking about it because I knew he had the story coming. And he said something that's like really obvious, but really important and very much lost in the discussion, which is the point is to win, right? What is it? You play to win the game. That's the point. And if Tatum, your shooting can come and go. And I get it. And I can already see you smiling because this is going to be the you're supposed to, if you're the superstar, you're supposed to bring it. I get it. But it is a little akin to like Kobe just like slogging through that game 7 against the Celtics in 2010, and Ron Artest having to hit one of the biggest shots and everything. Like, sometimes it's just a slog, but if we're going to talk about winning players and what else you do to impact winning, that's beyond your scoring or beyond your shooting. And if it involves things like defense and passing, playmaking, rebounding, just bring it on every possession at both ends, like, Tatum's a winner in that regard, right? If somebody wants to downgrade him on this series, I guess it'll happen. But if they win the championship, I think there's a case to be made for who fucking cares. Like, he did everything else he needed to do, and he had the luxury of it because he's got this really great cast around him.
That was really well said. And I always feel like, no. I feel like there's times when people are saying something that's like far more similar than they realize. But I guess we were on different sides of it after game 2. I know you were there. I was in attendance. And sometimes I can get more caught up in watching somebody in a way that I know is just different. It's just a different way to consume something. And on top of the turnovers that were all bad in game 1, it wasn't just the shooting. And I know the rebounding is always going to be there for him. I realize he's the defensive guy as far as what they're going to put their attention towards. The defense is primary concern. So when I went back and looked at his drives from those games, it's like, okay, everybody's coming up. There's always somebody. This almost like looks like a zone at times when he's off of the 3-point line of the break, just trying to decide what he wants to do. But I thought he got so frustrated with himself with maybe one of the worst dunk attempts that we've seen in playoff history. There was like 3 or 4 possessions there at the end watching in person. I'm like, okay, he's actually now like stuck. He doesn't know what he wants to do. And that, beyond the assists and the carryover from game 1, was all kind of baked into me thinking he had an awful game. Sure. That I know others. But here's what's funny about me is I think there are players that lose where we always have to ask what's wrong with them. When I'll watch games and go, there's nothing wrong with that guy. Like, he was awesome. His team lost, but we're just not allowed to do that. And so I think the other side of it, like, I just know what Boston would have been like. What if they had blown that lead? What if they had blown the lead in game 2? You think a bunch of people would be talking about how balanced Tatum was and he was taking what they were giving him? They would have destroyed him. So he was protected by the win. And then it kind of turned into something where I felt like, why are, like, at least with Bill and I after Sunday, maybe it was because we were both in the building. But all of this is to say, I think he's awesome. I feel like I've defended Tatum far more than I've been critical, but I'm also reasonable about who he is in comparison to the other great players in the league. And so even with a below average, Tatum's average statistical finals, and say Jalen wins the finals MVP, I don't have to put Tatum anywhere else because I was never hinting at him cracking ahead of Jokic, Luka, or Giannis, probably even SGA, depending on where you think Ann is, whose stock goes down with everything that happened in the West, the Embiid statistical part where I've already done my rant on that. And then these other players, like he's in that group and that's okay. And sometimes that group needs to be looked at as a block instead of necessarily names in order. Yeah,
no. I agree with all that. And I think that, just to grab onto one of our usual NBA cliches, what we often want of superstars in this league is, when it comes down to crunch time or just a big game or whatever, you can hand the ball to player X and say, go get us the win, right? That's
right,
how we
fix it for us. Right.
Right. Exactly. Everything else is fucked up. Our defense is falling apart. Our role players are shrinking in the moment. Maybe your co-star is shrinking in the moment, whatever. Kobe, go win us the game. Michael, go win us the game. And that's the model or the framework that we view superstardom through in this league. And it's fair. That standard is there, and it exists historically because we've had players who have met that definition more often than not. And I think it's a fair question to say, is Tatum that guy? Is Tatum the guy? Is he a star of a certain caliber, of maybe whatever tier, however you want to, like I like that when Seth Partnow does the tiers for The Athletic as opposed to just like a straight ranking, right? Because guys exist in groupings more than they do in a clean order. Is Tatum somewhere just slightly on the outside of that? Like, yes, perennially one of the best players in the league, perennial All-NBA, one of the best forwards in the league, one of the best players in the league, but maybe not the guy who you say, shit, this game's slipping away. Tatum, go fix it. Maybe he's not that. But also, by the way, he's still young enough to become that. And that's the other problem. What we get into is that we make these snap judgments and say, well, this guy's never going to be. It's just like with Luka. And I like, is he never going to be a good to great defender? I don't know. Maybe he gets into better shape and maybe he decides to dedicate himself. Maybe he matures a little bit and embraces those things. Like, there's a lot of career left for Luka Doncic for us to just, decide, oh, he's not going to be able to do these things. Steph Curry became a better defender over the course of their dynasty. And, Jokic, for that matter, became better over the course of his time, even after becoming MVP. So we do need to allow a little bit of room for guys to grow too.
Yeah, and I just think kind of some of the stuff that I was hitting on the open is sometimes maybe we'll have this rare finals result where it's like, yeah, everybody's kind of just where they're supposed to be. But that's not how it's going to be the few days after. That's just not the way it's going to go.
Maybe.
Am I getting pushback?
Well, again, far be it from me to try to predict how the take machines will fly off the handle after this finals is over. But I don't think, when all is said and done, that the end result here, whether it's a sweep, whether it's a 5-game gentleman sweep, whatever it ends up as, it's definitely, barring the, miracle comeback, I don't think anything in this series should be seen as an indictment of Luka or of Luka and Kyrie or of the Mavericks. It's like they weren't even expected to be here. The Mavericks themselves, I think, if they were being honest, did not expect to be here this soon. And that doesn't mean it's moral victories and all that. It's just that this team made great strides. They made some really smart moves at the deadline. By the way, moves that weren't all that popular at the time. Like, a lot of people were killing them for the Gafford in Washington. Oh, they gave up too much. And are these guys really going to move the needle? The front office did a great job. The players have done a great job. Jason Kidd's done, I think, a pretty good job. If they're going to get, shots taken at them because they lost in a sweep or something, I mean, okay, I get it. But the Celtics always had the better personnel, the more complete team. They were expected to be here from day one all the way through win 64 of the regular season. The Mavericks were not. There's no shame in them losing this one. This is step one for a young team.
Yeah, we're on the same page. Okay, a couple things that I want to talk about here. I want to get to your Jerry West piece that you had this morning, somebody that you've known a long time. I got to interview him a couple times, always appreciated it, and he passes. But before we finish there, let's stay on the franchise he's best known for, the Lakers, where this coaching thing has been weird now for, I guess we're on week 2 of this. Just do whatever you want on this, because this is more your world than it is mine. I mean, you're somebody that reports on the league, so I don't know if there's source stuff you can or can't tell us, but just take it wherever you want to go, Howard.
I talked to somebody yesterday from another team who I just said, so I don't know, what do you make of this and that? Because I don't know what the hell to make of it anymore. And he basically just said it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. Like, they don't seem to have a clear vision for what they want. You and I are speaking here on June 13th. We are, near the end of the finals, weeks away from the draft, weeks away from free agency. They don't have a coach in place. Nah, it's not the end of the world. Like, your front office is a little more important than your coach when it comes to the draft and free agency, but you kind of want to have everybody in place and on the same page and talk about what kind of players you need and what that coach himself might need. So we're late in the going. The other thing that, again, this rival GM said yesterday was basically, because they're interviewing some of the same guys in Cleveland and LA, like that Cleveland's the better job. Like, that's an indictment there too. And that's not, by the way, I don't say that as shade at Cleveland. Cleveland's got a younger, more well-rounded roster. And yeah, I think they've got some overlap and they got to figure out Mitchell versus Garland. They got to figure out Allen and Mobley and all that, but they've got plenty of options to work with that. And they've got a longer road because they're not built around a soon to be 40-year-old star. So that's it's objectively the better job, but that's not something you want to hear in this league when you're the Lakers. And, they have the self-image that you do. So yes, it has been one of the weirder coaching searches I've seen in terms of the way it's played out publicly. I don't know what to make of the Hurley flirtation. That seemed kind of 11th hour. And now we're right back to JJ Redick as the leading candidate, which was what we'd been hearing for weeks before the Hurley flirtation. So it's strange. I don't think any of it looks good for the Lakers. And, all that said, hey, if they get the right coach, whether it's JJ, whether it's James Borrego, whether it's whoever's behind curtain number 3, if that person, finds a way to get more out of this roster, I guess this will all just be a distant memory. But as of right now, I don't think it looks great.
Okay. Jerry West, he went to 9 finals, 1 title, the only player to win finals MVP. on the losing side in 1969, which I think is actually one of the most fitting ways of understanding Jerry West, because I only knew what my father had told me, and then going back and looking at the numbers and being in awe of the playoff totals and the averages, and you're like, oh my God. And then lucky enough to meet him through the ESPN stuff. And then when he promoted his book, I checked it out. It was tough. It was tough to read. There was a lot of pain in there. And he talked about it so openly at the end of his life, where that's why I always think about that finals MVP. I'm like, that's like almost the perfect way, because it's like the pain and yet the appreciation all at the same time. And I remember the chapters that he would talk about, like losing the Celtics. I mean, think about losing to this team in 62, 63, 65, 66, 68, and 69. 3 of those series, 7-game series. And he can't get over it. They lose to the Knicks in 70, then he wins in 72, and they lose to the Knicks in 73. You spent a lot of time with him. I don't know that he was complicated once we figured out why he was complicated.
Yeah.
But what was your relationship with him like, and kind of the learning experience it was for you once you get to know a guy like Jerry West?
Yeah, and I'll just say off the top, like, a lot of people knew him much better than I did. I started covering the Lakers in 97, the 97-98 season. And by then, Jerry had already started to recede a little bit into the background, wasn't as available or as around as he used to be. And I'll be honest, I didn't put this in the piece that's up on the Ringer today. I think I used the word intimidating at one point, but I didn't make it that much of a personal column. It was more just kind of like snapshots and certain memories of certain interviews with him. But Russillo, I don't mind telling you, or telling the audience, I have never been more intimidated by anybody in my career as a journalist. I've been at this for 30 years or so, 27 on the NBA. There are other people I was kind of in awe of. Like, I was in the same room with Bill Russell a few times. I was like, oh God, I really would love to meet Bill Russell. But like, I just was respecting his space more than anything. But there's an aura around Bill Russell that is just palpable. And I've interviewed Kareem a few times, and I always had a little bit of a thing with Kareem too. It's just like, these guys who are simultaneously larger than life, figuratively and literally, right? But nobody made me nervous. No matter how many times I had talked to him, nobody made me more nervous than Jerry West. I had to psych myself up to make the phone call sometimes, or to go walk over, even though I had talked to him a bunch of times. Part of it is Jerry West's own aura. And it's not just because he's the logo or Mr. Clutch or anything. It's just, there's just something about the man. The guy has an aura, but also, yes, he also has a bit of a temper, and he can be a little bit dicey sometimes. And those conversations can go any number of directions. And all of us in the media who dealt with him over the years, we all have our stories, and many of them are up on the interwebs today about being cussed out by him. And it's kind of a badge of honor, kind of like it was when, getting cussed out by David Stern. But it's just because he was so passionate about everything. Sometimes it's a negative passion, sometimes it's a positive passion. But Jerry West cared deeply about the game, about whatever team he was running, about legacy. I don't mean legacy in the flimsy sense that we use it in talk show debates now. I mean, true legacy of his own, of the people that he brought along, that he mentored, that he advised. You would not believe, I won't believe, because I don't know all the names. I just know that there are countless stars over the years who were not playing on Jerry West teams who would seek out his counsel. And that makes other GMs very uncomfortable for obvious reasons. But he stayed connected to the game in a way that, think about this, he dies yesterday at 86. How many people who were playing in the 60s still had enough of an attachment to the game and a gravitas and an understanding of today's game and today's players at that age? Normally it's like, oh, that guy, that's some guy from the black and white era, right? Like that guy's in a couple of grainy YouTube videos. Jerry was never some relic of the past. Jerry was always in the present. And part of it's because he stayed working in the league, but it's partially because he was still so sharp and embraced the changes to the game. He wasn't one of these guys sitting around going, oh, we're shooting too many threes, or, oh, damn analytics. And he stayed relevant because he cared that deeply about the game. I was going through some old notes, Russillo, and I didn't get this in the column, and I kind of wish I had now, but I described this scene the morning after the 2000 championship where I walked into his office, which in itself is mind-blowing to think about. Oh my God, I walked into Jerry West's office by myself, had a one-on-one with him the morning after they won the championship in 2000. This would never happen today. And he's just grim. The lights are down and he's not enjoying it at all. But one of the quotes that I did not resurface for this piece today was that he says something about like, all I care about is winning, and it's a sickness. He used that word, sickness. And I think he's used that in other places too. And he might've put it in his book. And then he mentioned how Christina Rice, Glenn Rice's wife. Do you remember this? There was the Glenn Rice's wife. I think she talked to Plashke in the middle of the series, ripping Phil Jackson for not getting Glenn Rice enough shots. It's ridiculous. Again, things that don't happen today that were kind of fun back in the day. And Jerry says, he goes, she said something, he goes, that I think she meant as a criticism, but I actually really liked it. He said, all that team cares about is winning. Or something like all the Lakers care about is winning. And he's like, he basically said, like, if he goes, long after we're gone, if like that's what they say about me or about the Lakers, that all we care about is winning, like that's pretty great. That was him. All he cared about was winning. And unfortunately for Jerry, he cared about it so deeply that I think it really ate him up in good times and bad. It was never enough. And it's not until the autobiography that we learn why some of those demons were there.
Yeah. I mean, when he would talk about his hatred for the Celtics because of coming up short, I mean, you're basically like, hey, you get in the league, you get in at 61, and now you're going to spend the next decade losing to him in the finals and getting so close. And the couple that they obviously think should have gone their way. And you're right. It helps you understand, like, here's this player, one of the best in the world, and he hates every minute of it because he cares about winning so much and they're getting so close. And it gave me a much better understanding of him. Granted, a guy far before my time. I would hear my father talking about him all the time, like going, that guy, and my father grew up a huge Celtics fan. So I could always tell when he would talk about West, this just feeling that he would have that was very different than other players that, he'd be rooting against or something like that. It was just like, Jerry West, now, let me sit down and let me tell you a story. And then to get to know him, again, I should rephrase that. I did not get to know him. I interviewed him a few times, said hello, whatever. And that's what's kind of funny is when we describe him this way, he was actually a very available person if you wanted to talk about basketball. Yeah. He just loved talking about basketball. Like the number of times I remember one show was like, hey, we get a number for Jerry West. Should we call him? And I was like, did we do that? We just called Jerry West. Like, I don't think we're allowed to do that. And then the next thing you know, he's like on later that afternoon. So he was definitely somebody that I'm just glad to read all these pieces about him. Cause I would never, it's kind of like one of our original points. I would hate for us to be on TV in the 1960s going, what's wrong with Jerry West? Because he's coming up short.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, that's what we would have done. It'd be like, hey, what does he need to do this offseason? Does he need to work on his post game? And there's some players that lose that we do have a lot of justification of wondering what they're doing wrong. But with West, that's just not the case.
Adam Silver has said many times in his time as commissioner that one of the wonderful things about running this league or being around this league is that I'm going to get his quote wrong, but Adam would basically say like our history is still with us, right? Our history walks among us. Like Bill Russell was still around when Adam first took over as commissioner, and he had become very close to Bill Russell. And Oscar Robertson was still around. Jerry West was still around. Elgin Baylor at that time, I think, was still around. And so that the history of the NBA, because it's a younger league, you could talk about these guys that formed the league basically, or that made the league what it is today, and who fill the record books and who are our reference points, our modern day reference points for what greatness has always been. And they're right there. You can reach out and touch them. You can talk to them. You can interview them. And that history was always with us. And, in the last week or so, we've lost Bill Walton and now Jerry West, obviously Bill Russell, a year or so ago. Was that 2 years ago now? And this is the march of time. We can't do anything about it, but you feel it. You feel it now because there are very few guys who connect. I was just saying, here was Jerry in his 80s, a guy from the earliest days of the NBA, almost the earliest days of the NBA, who was still talking and counseling and mentoring today's players. there just aren't that many around anymore. Selfishly, it hurts just to kind of lose these guys too, as a resource and as a vision into the past, because when they're gone, they're gone. And yeah, some of those stories are on paper somewhere in a book or in other stories. But Jerry was so available and in a way that was way beyond most of the other guys we'd talk about from that era, because he was in great health. He was still working in the league. He loved, as you said, Russillo, he loved to talk about the game. And what a privilege it was for all of us, and how much we all benefited and our readers and our listeners benefited from having that perspective and that insight into the past and the ability. We do these dumb comparisons across the eras where we're just talking out of our asses because we don't really know. Like, we do our best to figure out what it meant to do this in the 60s versus the 90s or the 2000s. But Jerry West actually knows because he saw it all. And that's what we're losing, as a Jerry West or others, leave us. And so I just thought that was an interesting note, and credit to my buddy Bill Oram at the Oregonian, because we had a conversation about an hour before you and I got on where we were talking about this, and he made this point very poignantly to me, and I wanted to make sure to make that point myself.
Yeah, the piece is really, really good and kind of digs into some of him moving on from the Lakers, but never really looking at it any differently. And there's a couple anecdotes in there that I'm not going to share because I want people to read the piece that are really terrific. So Howard, thanks for the time. Enjoy the rest of the finals, depending on how much we have in free agency. I'm sure we'll check in again. Thanks, man.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Russillo. Good seeing you.
You want details? Fine. I drive a Ferrari 355 Cabriolet. What's up? I have a ridiculous house in the South Fork. I have every toy you can possibly imagine. And best of all, kids, I am liquid. So, now you know what's possible. Let me tell you what's required.
The email address is lifeadvicerr@gmail.com. What's up the Alliance, though?
Let's go.
The boys.
Got to lead
We're
with
back.
that.
Yeah.
It was actually relatively sweat-free, too. Like Tatum hit pretty early. Luka had like 3 assists in the third quarter. Jalen had a huge third quarter that took us over. And then the Celtics that was really the only thing was if the Celtics were going to lose that game. So pretty nice for the boys.
Okay. Kyle, how are you doing? You look fresh. Did you get a haircut? Did you get them all cut?
Ha! Yes, got a haircut. Thank you.
First time I heard that, I laughed. Long time ago, though. Okay.
Good one.
Little
Long time
feedback.
ago,
Little
Long
feedback. Ryan, you said you had the best Mexican food of your life in Glastonbury.
True story.
I live in Niantic, Connecticut. All right. I need the name of that restaurant to check it out. No one loves tacos and tequila more than me, so let me know. Let me in on this gem. All right. It's Sayulita. How often do you go, Ceruti?
Well, it's hard to get into, man. They don't take reservations. It's not a big place. It's basically just like an old house. And so you could wait for 2 hours there if you don't go at the right time. So I try to get there every couple months, but it's hard. It's hard. There's a famous story. I think it was some local news person asked Danny Hurley after like a 2:00 game, like what he was doing that afternoon. He was like, "Oh, there's this little taco place in Glastonbury called Sayulita. I'll be there." And it was like, it's on the map now. Like, people know about it. But yeah, it's excellent.
Was it his daughter that did an Instagram post that said the reason why he didn't take the Lakers job ultimately was because they didn't want to not be able to go to Sayulita?
I think so, which is incredible. Because like there's better tacos in Glastonbury, Connecticut than there are in Los Angeles. True story.
Well, trust me, whenever I say it, people are enraged. And I completely understand. But it's the best Mexican food I've ever had in my life. And you say, "Oh, you went to Mexico City?" I'm like, "Yeah, dude. But I mean, how many days in a row can you do street tacos?" You're like, "Hey, this is really good. This is fresh. This is great ingredients." I'd like to open one in Manhattan Beach. And then maybe Hurley would have taken the Lakers job. So I don't want to do that to UConn fans.
San Diego people get the most upset when you say you found good tacos somewhere. I think it's just one of their 3 things that they have. I'm not sure what the other 2 are, but they really
Navy SEALs.
They really cool. Put yeah, sure, but like that, it's in their Mount Rushmore, and they need everyone to know.
Okay, yeah, somebody's mad right now, listening. Don't know what to tell you.
A taco city power ranking next episode.
Yeah, the place is incredible. Okay, this one's titled AIDS. That got the attention of our screening process. Has nothing to do with that. Although, I don't know, Kyle, do people live in fear of AIDS? Your generation, the way my generation kind of walked around.
I feel like I was
scared.
Still in elementary school, which, probably didn't have anything to worry about at that time. But I do remember that was in the discourse, I think.
Yeah. Well, it got my attention, but it has nothing to do with this. So I'm glad, because I don't think I would have read it. That's tough. What's up? 21, 5'4", 125. Can't bench 100 pounds, but I run a 15-minute 5K. The trade-off is not worth it.
100 pounds? Damn.
Have you tried to bench 100 pounds? I don't know. This now with the title and that he 5'4", 125, maybe. All right. Well, this makes sense because he wants to live in a van. I have 6 credits left of college to finish. I'm starting to plan for what to do afterwards. I got a full-time job recently, which is remote, $70,000 for software engineering, and I thought it'd be fun to travel to all the national parks in a van while I'm in my early 20s. I also thought it'd be a fun way to pass time and learn some useful skills to renovate a beater of a van from Facebook Marketplace when I'm not busy with school, work, or sports cross country. All right, this guy does run. He flies. The problem is I have zero experience with any building or electricity or plumbing or whatever goes in renovating a van. I've seen some videos on YouTube of people doing it, but it looks very complicated. I'm eager to learn, but I'm kind of a dumbass. I don't want to spend a couple $1,000s on a van and whatever tools I would need to realize that I'm severely underqualified and can't do it. Since y'all seem more experienced with this stuff, would it be feasible to go from zero experience to renovating a van? How much would I have to spend on tools to get it done? Is van life by yourself in your early 20s a dumb idea and investment in general? Also, I do not have a car. Should I buy one before this?
Maybe start with a vehicle.
Oh, I'm gonna get my dad on the pod for this one. He would have all the answers. I don't know.
I mean, look, the way you framed it out, pun. This sounds like a bad idea.
You think? I have no experience doing any of these things, but I want to do it.
Yeah,
I will say the van thing is oversaturated.
People.
What? Van bubble?
Well, there's just too many people when I scroll on my Instagram, TikTok, whatever, on YouTube that are just doing the van thing. So I don't care if you do it. If you want to do it, go for it. I don't think you need to be like a vlogger, because there's just too many of those already. But
I don't think that's what he's.
Sounds like vans.
I don't think it's a
algorithm.
content thing.
Sounds like you're watching a lot of van stuff, buddy. Maybe
I am.
You're too close to this subject.
Well, you know how you like get the stuff in your feed that you don't really want. Like I got a bunch of like gnarly accident videos, and I'm like, why? Now they're all in my feed.
Well,
here,
you stop for 1 second, and then they're like, oh yeah, he's a big accident guy.
So that's where I'm at. But I had a big van thing for a while, and those vans, some of them are like really nice. I'd imagine. I don't know, maybe the YouTube money's probably pretty good if you're doing that, but it seems kind of late to the party. So I don't know anything about renovating them. I'd imagine if you have zero skill, it's going to be a big problem starting from zero. Can you just like do an Airbnb thing? Like I had a buddy that just kind of traveled to a bunch of different cities when he got out of college, didn't have a van. He just Airbnb'd, and he didn't spend a ton of money on housing and stuff, and just figured out what city he wanted to live in. And that's what he did. Why can't you just do that?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely a pro bet on yourself podcast, but this seems like it might take years, and then you might not complete it. That's what if we're doing an alliance on this, my pick is going to be like you give up on this after several years, and that you've got a half completed van that might not even be done correctly. And I think it'll just be like a story where people ask me like, "How are those rabbits doing? Huh? You hating your life?" They're going to be like, "How's the van guy? Doing great?" And you're the guy with
sitting in your parents' driveway for 2 years.
You're spending your Saturdays just like scratching your head, trying to figure out what this part is that you need to find or how to get to it.
That happened to me. I inherited a riding tractor mower because I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to do this in the backyard. It's going to be awesome." Belt popped. That thing's been in my shed for like 2 years. You think I'm fixing that thing?
Nope. I didn't realize we had such a great van resource, though. Here on the show. Yeah. You said something that I think kind of confirms it for me that you shouldn't do this is I don't know how to do any electrical. I don't know how to do any plumbing. I only did framing and some flooring, shingles, roofing. Anybody can do roofing. I wouldn't say shingles, you just kind of have to have an eye for it. Decks, I was great. But there were things I would look at and be like, I have no idea what's going on there. Okay. And I think I was pretty handy at one point because I was able to do some of those things. But it's a bit like a foreign language where then I have the tools, and I thought it was cool to have like tools. I bought a circular saw when I was in Connecticut because I was like, oh, this is the right one to get. And I'm like, you're never using
That's what men
this.
do.
Like, what
yeah.
What are you going to do? Build a deck? Like you didn't even have any land. Like, get some land first, circular saw guy. So the reason there was a couple things that I would do later on, far removed from that point of my life, where I was like, man, your skills are a little diminished here. And if you have zero going into this, and you're admitting that you're kind of a dumbass with this stuff, like this takes incredible patience, and I wouldn't say like an engineer's mind. Like you could probably figure it out, but I'm doing a poor job of explaining this. I think it's like the guy in your group that you just don't trust to hold something versus the guy that you do, right? Where do you have a habit of just breaking shit? Do you have a habit of somebody lends you something and then you're returning it damaged? I just think that there are people, whether it's caring about other people's property, respecting their property, or sometimes even just respecting or caring about the condition of their own property. I think you have to be wired in a way that gives you an advantage going into this so blindly. And if you, I don't know, as simple as you fall down, am I making any sense here? Here's a perfect example. When you leave your apartment with your suitcase, do you always fucking smack it into something and leave a mark like Chip and Nick, Ceruti days?
Brought it back.
Or do you like go, okay, let me get the right angle, let me take my steps patiently, and let me make sure I don't smash my suitcase into my walls. Like here's another example. I had a friend staying with me and I set him up in the guest room. There was a little ottoman deal in the corner, and he put down his suitcase and he opened up the top of it and he just flapped it right open, and it dented both corners of the sheetrock. He was there 30 seconds. And I was like, dude, you probably could have been a little bit more delicate about that. So my fear is if you're in that lane of person, you're never going to figure out any of this stuff. You're going to think you did. You're going to get the plumbing going. You're going to watch some YouTube videos. You're going to be bonding the seams. And you're going to be like, oh my God, like I'm figuring this out. Okay, this one goes here, and we're going to use a little gravity out. The second the plumbing isn't right in a van that you're living in, that's going to be a tough hang.
What's that smell?
Trip might be over. Yep.
Yeah. So I like the idea that at 5'4", 125, you're going to have plenty of room in there if you're able to pull this off. But there are two very distinct groups of people, and the people that are constantly breaking shit around their house or just clumsy with things, or it's not that they're disrespectful of specific items, but they don't think of the care part of it. If you're somebody like that, I don't know if you'll have the mind to do this in a way where you'll figure it out and you'll be rewarded for all the time and effort and the money that'll go into buying the tools and for all the supplies on top of everything else. It sounds like you're signing yourself up for a massive time headache, financial headache, and a minor disappointment. I'm not going to say it leads to full-blown depression, but at the end of it, you're going to be like, I'm incapable.
Yeah, I'm all for dudes.
So why confirm it?
I'm all for dudes making bad investments in their 20s. It's just a bad bet. But I don't know if this one's going to cash in. You know what I mean? It's not like buying, what did you say? You bought a bunch of like patio furniture and when for your condo or whatever. And you're like, this was silly. I'm down I'm down $4,000 for this fire pit. I've used it twice. Like at least you can go out there and you can sit there by yourself if you want. But this thing
great the first night.
This thing needs to go. The septic you said needs to work. Although what did you say? 5'4", 125. He's probably not doing a ton of damage to septic. But I mean, I think,
dude, I mean, guys still have to go.
Yeah, but it's mild, right? No one's worried. You'd be worried if I go in there and be like, hey, listen, I'm sorry. But anyway, I just don't think this one, I don't think you're going to cash this one in, and it'll be a headache. It's not like a big TV that you just, I'll put this $3,000 TV on layaway. I'll have the best Super Bowl party. Like that's, at least there's something you could say you got out of it. This, I think you're just going to be very frustrated. And I don't know, do you even have a spot to store this? Like then you're going to maybe try to be unloading it. And
yeah,
I hate to sound down, but I just don't think I at least want you to have fun one time with it, and I don't think you'll have fun one time with it.
Yeah, I think it's this. I'll bring up like too many reels and TikToks that I watch. Like, there's always the people that like want to be the DIY home people, and they're like, "Hey, I'll go to IKEA and I'll buy all these like built-ins, and I'll just like install them, and I caulk them, and I do all this stuff." Or like, I'm gonna, you know what, I want new countertops, and I'm gonna paint them instead of like putting in the actual new granite ones because it'll save me money. And it's always a bad idea. And in the comments, the actual construction guys are like, "Yeah, that's gonna peel off in like 6 months." And I just feel like people think they can do more things now because they see people doing them on the internet. And the van thing, like, it's like, oh yeah, that'll be super fun. I'll just go to all these parks and like I'll build this van. And they don't actually realize how much of a pain in the like even like pools. Like, people are like, "Oh, I love pools." Like, you know how much work pools are, you know? And people just don't think about that. They just think about the fun parts of it. So I think you got to consider just how this might be a huge pain in the ass. And even though you're going to see some parks, you might not have that much fun on the ride.
Our van remodels the podcast of the automotive industry.
They're basically boats, dude. Sorry.
No, I don't take offense to that. I think you're absolutely right, Ceruti, that it's kind of great that people are maybe thinking they can do more stuff, but there's a difference between redoing your cabinets and actually redoing your cabinets.
Yeah, like putting flooring in.
New knobs.
You know?
Yeah. I've just seen people paint. Like, everybody's like, "I'll just grab some brushes and then I'll grab some paint." It's like, I'll figure this out. And they kind of think they killed it. And then anybody that actually knows how to paint,
any contractor,
would look at it and go, "Oh my God, like, what the fuck is this?"
I give this 3 months.
Yeah, right. Okay. We did do this one before. Go ahead. What'd you have?
I was going to say, obviously we were just super negative there. So, you know, I mean, I'm not trying to kill anyone's dreams, but just trying to be realistic.
I think we did him a favor.
Yeah.
If he takes our advice.
Not what you want to hear, but sometimes what you have to hear.
So did we do this one about the full frontal on the work Zoom call? I think we did.
I don't know.
And
I feel like that would ring a bell. And unless it already happened to a very famous dude at CNN, I think this is the first time I heard it.
It's not from him.
Tubes.
Yeah. So I guess I'll read it again. I think we did because I remember the shout out that she gave, because she was a big Michael Porter Jr. fan, because she played hoops. Yeah, she played hoops in college. So here's what she sent us months ago. Work for a mid-size-ish company in New York City. With this company, I worked closely with a team about 2 weeks ago in an internal Zoom meeting with 12 people. One of my coworkers, we'll say Mark, was talking to my boss about a project we're working on. As they were discussing the project, a guy who is new-ish here, we'll call him Ken, 45 years old, I guess somehow accidentally turns on his camera. Now everyone can see Ken is completely naked with his dick right in view of the camera. To make it worse, the camera is facing his bed, and in the distance, there's a naked woman in the bed. So we're all looking close up at this view of yeah, what's that?
I don't think that's worse. I think he's got a better alibi than before.
Yeah, at least it's an excuse. I don't know, like just being naked for no reason. But anyway.
Interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way. Does it make it better? If she had written the email and said, "And to make things slightly better," I don't think anybody would ever write it that way. So, but to improve the situation,
at least
wasn't a total loss.
Yeah. I don't. I think I'm agreeing with the emailer and her version of storytelling here. Okay. So we're all looking at a close up of Ken's genitals and a woman off in the background in the bed. I know Ken is divorced. Mark, who was talking, stopped mid-sentence and said, "What the hell is going on here?" After about 30 seconds of discomfort, my boss goes, "Ken, please turn off your camera." Ken turns his camera off, then turns his mic on and says, "Oh, sorry about that, guys."
What are you even supposed to do? I mean, you have to leave your job in that situation. You can't be there anymore. Unless like unless it's really impressive, and then you could probably stay. But
like, hey,
anyone have any questions?
I don't want to read into it that much, but that woman in the background looked very satisfied.
Yeah.
What can I just ask before we move any further? What kind of angle do you need to have?
This thing's already a mess. I'm sorry.
But what are you asking? What kind of zoom angle do you need to have to see your crotch and your face? Or maybe maybe his face wasn't even there, right? Because I mean, what kind of angle would you have to be sitting at your computer and I could see both, your
standing
head and standing, I guess.
What if he's standing and she's off to the side?
It could be.
Yeah.
You're right. It could be. I don't know.
Oof.
Maybe his face wasn't in there and he's just got deniability. He's like, I don't know, I'm hacked.
What if he says, "Oh, my kids are messing around with the backgrounds again"? We're a pretty liberal family, pretty laid back about all this stuff. Okay. I love the commentary. Ken, please turn off your camera. Sorry about that, guys. The meeting continued and ended at its regularly scheduled time to end. The next day, Mark sent an email to our boss and copied HR saying he no longer wants to work on projects with Ken because he, quote, showed up to an online meeting fully naked with another person in the background. Our boss emailed back and said he and HR are looking into the incident and will decide how to proceed. Since this everything has been business as usual. Side note, one of our other coworkers was on the call and said he didn't know what was going on. He just thought it was, quote, a finger and some hair. I am one of the... I don't think why is the Michael Porter Jr. thing making me think we read it? And then now
Buddy, no
line,
way have I heard this before.
Yeah.
A finger and some hair.
Yeah. Kyle would have kept track of that.
Yeah.
I am one of the few girls in my office and on my team. I work in a male-dominated field. My seat in the office is very close to Ken. Since the incident, I don't feel comfortable being around him or speaking to him. Our first interaction since it happened, I saw him in the hallway. He said, "Sup, boss," and reached out to give me knuckles.
Wow, so Ken's doing fine.
Yeah, Ken's this guy's.
He's not.
I got to tell you, there are times in life like maybe the ultimate goal is to be unfazable.
Mm-hmm.
Ken has reached it. Sup, boss? I responded by saying nothing and practically slamming myself into the wall in an attempt to dodge him in his hand. My question is, showing a full frontal on Zoom is absurd. Shouldn't Ken be fired? Should I reach out to HR as well or just ask for my seat to be moved? It's been 2+ weeks. Why is my company not acknowledging this? God, knowing how the things go, I'm surprised you didn't just ask for a promotion and you would have gotten it. You definitely could have asked for your seat to be moved. That's a no-brainer. I mean, you basically, on the sup boss knuckles exchange, kind of let him know with body language that you weren't exactly down to be his friend. So she sent us an update. After 4 long and uncomfortable months, our work flasher has finally been fired. He was not fired for the obvious reason of the flashing incident. He was fired because he did not show up to work on Monday. He told some coworkers and our boss he had a funeral. My boss was skeptical because of his flaky attendance in the past. My boss had IT look into his computer log hours. As it turns out, he had a golf outing on his Outlook calendar. To make it even worse, when he came in the day after, he told people about how sad the funeral was. Unfazable.
There was like a 1% of me that wanted to be like, all right, like Ken was naked on the Zoom. Maybe he fucked up. Maybe he's not is he automatically the worst dude in the world if he screwed up? Clearly he's a little bit weird, but now that's gone. All right, this guy sucks.
It's gone. I think I just wanted to read that. There's not really anything else to add, so we should do one more.
Yeah.
Speaking of a golf outing. All right. Sup, boys. 5'10", no impressive gym stats, but a 4-2 amateur jiu-jitsu record. Look out. Let's get to the chase. My office was out yesterday for golf outings. It's a small business. What if this guy's Ken?
I recently got fired.
Yeah. Like he chimes in. He's like 4. Well, no.
Everyone's so sensitive today. I don't know what the big deal is.
275, 315 deadlift. Did show my dick on a Zoom at work once. All right. All right. Small business. We had to go to 2 separate outings because they were mistakenly scheduled for the same day, with me being the newest guy. And by the way, how about the Pats Hall of Fame induction ceremony during the NBA Finals? Should Wick have issue with the Kraft family? Like, did you not believe in us to schedule this during the NBA Finals? All
yeah,
right.
I thought there could have been a
question.
better day.
I agree. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yesterday was
like, what's going on with Brady?
Wait, how about this? Yesterday was 6/12. Do you think that has something to do with it?
The statue's going to be 12 feet, Kyle. When are you going to go visit it?
Probably the first time I set foot in Massachusetts. So that'd be cool.
I think that's a great use of time. Okay. All right. So we had to go to 2 separate outings because they were mistakenly scheduled for the same day. With me being the newest guy in the office of 15, 5 guys that can golf, meant that I went with the other salesman who golfs the least of all of us. and went to the lesser golf event. The other salesman in question, let's call him Dave, mid-40s, brought along his buddies from high school. Round goes fine. We're smoking. We're drinking. A little smoking, a little drinking. We used most of my balls in the scramble, he said in parentheses. Though I was clearly the fourth wheel or the thruple the whole time. And when we got to the 12th hole of our round, the three of them mentioned they have to go to various practices for their kids, so we should leave early. Not wanting to play by myself for 6 holes in the middle of a log jam, I also left. Now I come in this morning to greet my project manager, and she asks, how was the round? To which I reply with the previous. She then gets pretty upset and informs me I should have to tell the CEO of our small company what happened. Turns out the golf ball sponsors of the event were expected. Turns out the golf ball sponsors of the event were expected to stay for the dinner after, not communicated to me. That, on top of leaving early of an expensive outing for the business, was not seen as kosher, to say the least. As much as I could throw this dude under the bus, I don't think it's really necessary. I feel I can say the round went well and my boss wouldn't care and move on. Though my project manager clearly thinks differently. What should I do? And do the boys have any company golf outing stories to share? Was Ceruti using his high school golf experience to hustle some ESPN execs? You want to take that last one first, Ceruti?
No, definitely not. I played in the ESPN tournament a couple times, but nothing. There was, nothing crazy.
I'm trying to think of which execs would even invite you to golf.
Yikes! Ouch.
I'm just being realistic.
Well, I'm not.
Jesus Christ, dude.
I don't know. I mean, I didn't really. I'm trying to think.
What? Hey, I know how the place operates.
Like with Ceruti.
No, not because of you or your personality, but just like the fact that somebody high up would be like, you know what? Who's working behind the glass today that I can golf with? It's not 30 yet.
Yeah, they're trying to golf with JJ Redick, not me.
Hey, it sounds better when you explain it, but we'll always have the clip. So.
Okay.
It hurt a little bit.
Look, I think there's a couple people that got like 3 contracts out of that place just because they played at Avon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Smart thing to do. If I could do it all over again, just join Avon. Probably not though. Okay, so here's my main concern. If the project manager freaked on you about a potential CEO freak out, you have to tell the CEO now. You definitely can't lie and say everything was fine. So my guess would be, well, I don't know. I don't know how everybody's different with this kind of stuff. You're supposed to go to the dinner after, but nobody told you. The problem is now somebody else knows what happened and it's going to get around. And sometimes people love just sharing stuff. It's not because they're evil, but it's this like, oh, hey, I get to bitch about a coworker right now. And it's somebody underneath me. He's like, oh, did you hear what Brad and the guys did at the golf outing? They left early. So now she's getting the first word in. She's getting the opening statement and the closing statement before you even addressed it. So I know the easier thing is like, why even put yourself out there? But there's a mole now. There's a mole. And if she was upset, that means she thinks it's important. And that means she's probably at some point going to share it, whether it's like a direct thing or it's just going to come up at some point down the road. And so you could maybe save yourself by never saying anything. But if you lie, then it becomes way worse with the whole deal. So maybe you can find like a casual setting if it's a small business, maybe the next work trip. I don't know, if you're at the Hotel Marriott, just experiencing life together. You say, hey, dude, I don't know if you heard, but I kind of wanted to explain what happened at this golf outing. And now that I see, like, I can see where you're upset, but you have to understand like my intent or the things that I did not intend. And by the way, nobody even told me there was a dinner after the fact. And so I was just playing by myself and I was kind of in everybody's way. So because I golf, I was like, well, I don't want to do this. And it would never mean that I was ever doing it and not appreciating what you were doing or being disrespectful. It still may not work or he may not care, but I still feel like those two avenues are way better outcomes than you certainly ignoring it, and worse than that, lying about what happened.
Well, where everyone in his foursome was working for the company, or didn't he say something about high school buddies, or were they high school buddies that also work for the company? Like, was there any outside guy in this group?
Yeah, see, there's one salesman, and then he brought his buddies from high school. So that means, yeah.
So
he doesn't want to throw him under the bus, Kyle. There you go. Salt.
I hear it.
Thinking about the other guy.
You've got a couple options here. A, you say nothing, which you're saying maybe would hurt you in the long run. B, if you do try to say, which what I was going to suggest was saying, listen, like, I didn't even know we were allowed to still play. I thought we needed to have our full thing. And, I left because I thought it seemed like you said, things were log jammed and I was alone. And I just thought the rules were different. But then, some people don't like when you throw other people under the bus, like even in an explanation, like, oh, this guy doesn't own your shit. I think sometimes when you do make a mistake, the best thing you could do is own up to it. Be like, hey, I got nothing to say other than I'm sorry there was a little miscommunication, but that's on me. So maybe that's the move. Although I could understand saying, listen, there were some outside guys that really didn't care about this, and I just didn't think it was an option for me to stick around. Like, I thought there was real rules here.
Can we get some clarification on the leadership hierarchy? So the project manager's mad. The CEO doesn't know, but didn't they say that he didn't think the boss would care or that it would be that big of a deal? So is there like a third? I'm confused about that.
See, I just don't like where he says, as much as I could throw this dude under the bus, which I, again, understand why you wouldn't want to, I don't think it's necessary. I feel I can say the round went well, my boss wouldn't care and move on. Yeah, I don't know. The project manager is the flaw in your entire deception game here. If she was upset, she's going to tell on you.
In that case, I would tell the boss what happened then.
Be like, hey, project manager got real upset. Now, by the way, she might be overstating her whole deal with some fucking ridiculous corporate structure power play thing of like, I can get mad at you because of the hierarchy.
This is
here.
unacceptable. Those are probably words
and
that
I'm
were
going to
said.
make this right. I'm going to make this a way bigger deal because most of the shit I do here is pointless. So I'm just going to get on your case about shit because that's what I like to do. Instead of solving problems, I like to add. I like to layer them on like a cake. So, you shouldn't have said anything. Obviously, you screwed that part up. You should have just told her what you planned on telling the CEO. But you don't have to necessarily throw the other guy under the bus. You could just go to the other guy and be like, hey, do you know she got like pissed? Now he might say, why did you tell her? So now you have to deal with that. I mean, ultimately, this thing is not, do you do a good job? Are you awesome at your job? If the answer is yes, no one's going to give a shit about this. So, maybe they're mad for a little while, but you have a rat. You have a rat on the inside.
And I think owning shit like that is better than like coming off as a little bit of a weasel or a rat about it. So I think people do respect that if you're just like, I'm not going to try to tell you 7 reasons why this didn't go well. I'm sorry. I understand.
That'll do it for Life Advice. Thanks to Ceruti, Wargon, and Kyle. Please check out our show on YouTube. We have something planned for after both rounds of the NBA draft, which is now 2 days now. So subscribe to that. Ryen Russillo Podcast, also on Ringer and Spotify.